How is it possible for yellow to be one of the most beautiful colors and at the same time one of the saddest? Today we are doing the history of the color yellow. And the format for this video is going to be slightly different, and that's because yellow for me is one thing and one thing only: Vincent van Gogh's sunflowers. And out of all the colors, I hope you stick around for this one because it's the most important. By now, we are all familiar with the fact that Van Gogh never sold a single painting throughout his life. But what is less known is just how unpopular he was when he was alive. People did not like Van Gogh. He was manic and frantic and very mentally unwell. People were often frightened of him, and as a result, he was a very lonely man. But despite his eccentricities, there was one person who loved him always, and that was his brother Theo. Theo was an art dealer in Paris, and from a young age recognized Vincent's talent as an artist and convinced him to pursue it as a career when he didn't know where to turn. The Sunflowers was painted when Vincent was living in Arles in the south of France. He moved to Arles from Paris after having a very difficult 2 years trying to make it as an artist. Vincent found it really hard to make friends. People didn't like him, and he was just so over the top all the time. Even his brother Theo wrote how relentless Vincent's talking was and how it was just driving him up the wall. So Vincent hopes to start over in Arles in a sunnier, yellower place. And for a short period it works. He's energized and he's painting all the time. But before long, his loneliness is haunting him again, and just like in Paris, he's isolated. The locals think he's kind of crazy. He's painting frantically on the streets, and he's drinking a lot of absinthe, and he's visiting brothels all the time. And so the people of Arles are slightly frightened by his unpredictability. And so, desperate for friendship, Vincent decides that he wants to start an art collective in Arles, where he can invite all the best painters from Paris to come and see how beautiful the sunny weather is and be with him. And so he manages to find a house in a rundown part of Arles that he can use to house this collective. It's called the Yellow House. And Vincent knows exactly who he wants to join him as the first artist: Paul Gauguin. When Vincent was living in Paris, Gauguin was one of the only artists who was kind to him. But the truth is that Gauguin didn't want to go to Arles. He only went because Theo, Vincent's brother and his art dealer, convinced him to go. He offered to pay him to go and spend time with his brother, who he loved. And it's in anticipation for his friend to come to Arles that Vincent creates the sunflowers that we know and love today. He knew that Gauguin enjoyed the sunflowers, and he wants to make his room beautiful for his arrival. He paints 4 renditions of it, the final one featuring 15 sunflowers at all phases of life in layers of butter yellow and sunshine yellow. He fills his room with 2 of his favorite paintings and waits for his friend to come. These paintings by Vincent were an act of hope. They symbolize his dream for friendship and human connection and love in his life. Of course, Gauguin loved the paintings, but he wasn't in Arles long before his relationship with Vincent started to fall apart. They were very different men. Gauguin was worldly and sophisticated, and Vincent was a very salt-of-the-earth person. He would paint frantically, and talking, and Gauguin was like, "Dude, leave me alone." And one night, in an act of frustration, he storms out of the house, swearing to return to Paris. This sends Vincent into a spiral, and in what we know now as an act of deep self-harm, he cuts off his ear. You cannot blame Gauguin for wanting to leave and wanting to get out of a situation that was bad for him, but you also can't help but feel absolutely heartbroken for Van Gogh in this moment. It's at this point that Van Gogh knows how deeply unwell he is, and several months after, he ends up checking himself into an asylum. While in the asylum, Vincent gets invited to show his art at a gallery in Brussels, and he's so proud to have been invited and wants to send the painting he is most proud of, his yellow sunflowers. Unfortunately though, people don't understand it and it doesn't sell. In 1890, Vincent leaves the asylum and goes to Paris to spend some time with Theo. And one day, walking in the wheat fields, he tells Theo that he thinks the sadness will last forever, and he decides to end his life. For Vincent's funeral, Theo and his wife make sure that every artist in Paris is there, and they surround the coffin with his paintings of the sunflowers as well as actual sunflowers. Despite how many of us claim that we love Van Gogh, the question remains, have we learned the lesson? Because the way that society treats mentally ill people has not changed. Far too often we come across those who are suffering from depression or mania, or who are behaving in ways that are strange to us, and our reaction is to keep our heads down, ignore them, or even worse, laugh at them or make fun of them. And so the story of the sunflowers is not one of the crazy genius or the misunderstood artist. It's a reminder to not judge others and to show kindness as much as possible. That's what Vincent would have wanted. And that's what yellow means to me.